Welcome to episode 140 of Stageworthy. I'm your host, Phil Rickaby. Stageworthy is a podcast about people in Canadian theatre featuring conversations with actors, directors, playwrights, and more. My time heading out east to the Fundy and Halifax Fringe Festivals is coming up fast. If you're in Toronto on August 16th, I'll be performing my solo play, The Commandment, at the Red Sandcastle Theatre that night, just before I head out east, and I would love it if you would come. You'll find ticket info at homebodyproductions.ca. If you have a comment about the show or just want to drop me a line, you can find Stageworthy on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at StageworthyPod, and you can find the website at stageworthypodcast.com. If you want to drop me a line, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Phil Rickaby, and my website is philrickaby.com. My guest is Alexander Thomas, who appears in Theatre Mischief's A Girl Lives Alone starting August 11th as part of the 2018 Summer Works Festival. Now, the play that you're rehearsing is it A Girl...
A Girl Lives Alone.
A Girl Lives Alone.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, has a bit of a... Like, even the title sort of stresses me out a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's described as a comedy.
Yeah.
So...
It's, I guess, dark... comedy. Well, I mean, I don't know if I don't know how much I should have talked to Jessica with how much I.
Well, we don't want to. I mean, obviously, we're going to talk a little bit about it, but we don't want to get. I don't want spoilers, but I mean, with a title like "A Girl Lives Alone."
Yeah, actually, I mean, it's an apartment building,
right,
in Harlem. My character is the landlord of the apartment building, and a murder takes place in there. I mean, I guess I can say that because you find that out almost immediately.
That's like right away?
Yeah. And this young girl that was staying there is murdered. And it's sort of like what this does to, it's about loneliness.
Yeah.
It's about people needing each other and fearing each other. Mm. And, because everyone's on pins and needles and who in the building can you trust? And, And it's actually most of the characters in the building are women.
Okay.
And that might have something to do with the title. But there's men there, and then my character is there too. So it's and there's a lot of fun stuff she does. It's sort of like a Hitchcock kind of feeling to it.
Well, Jess is like her writing has always been a little bit like she's really. I don't mean this as a trite way. She's clever, and her writing has always really reflected that.
I think you'll find that with this. It's some really funny stuff.
Okay, all right. Play a comedy that starts with a murder. You know what? There are plenty of comedies that start with murder.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Actually, yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Just to turn to you, we'll come back to the A Girl Lives Alone. One of the questions I always ask is like, what draws somebody to work in theater? And so, what was it that brought you to theater? What's your theater origin story?
Well. I mean, I should really tell you my story, period. So,
let's do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm originally, I was born in America.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in Albany, New York.
Okay.
But that was a long time ago. and that's my roots in theater really started there, my interest in it. But I about 15 years ago, I got married. Mm-hmm. My second marriage. That's another whole story. And my wife works for the German Foreign Service.
Okay.
So every 4 or 5 years, this typical American who didn't even have a passport when I met her now lives in different countries. So her first posting was in London.
Okay.
We were there for 5 years, and then Berlin for 4, and now we've been here in Toronto for 4.
Okay.
Another year here. So it's kind of interesting. I'm always the new kid on the block.
Sure.
But I've managed to keep my acting going and to work in each of these countries and cities.
Can I ask you what the biggest shock for you was? First off, when you, who had never really traveled before, found yourself in England.
Yeah.
What was the biggest shock for you?
Well, I have to say, I mean, I have traveled like within the state.
Sure.
Traveling in the States is almost like Europeans going to different.
Yeah.
But because LA I met her in LA when I was living in LA, which is like the polar opposite of New York City.
Of course, yes.
But first of all, it's just an eye opener to. I'm probably gonna get in trouble for this.
No, say it.
Seeing how freaking bonkers we are. I had no idea.
I knew when you say we,
America.
Okay. Yeah.
I knew we were like off the rails. I mean, look, I'm a black man. Okay, so you can't grow up black in America and not have some criticism.
Sure.
Of a lot of things that happen there. So, but when I got over there, and it was just like it's just this realization that. Oh, other people don't do this. They're not gun nuts everywhere. They don't make circuses out of their politicians running for an office. Yeah. It's not like a carnival. Yeah. It was like, what? You know, we really didn't know that, you know? Mm-hmm. And again, to bring up a darker side, no pun intended, people ask me what's the difference for me. I'll put it this way. I haven't lived in my home country for about 15 years now. Right. And I haven't been pulled over or harassed by the police in 15 years. Huh. Coincidence? I don't know. You tell me. Huh. I don't know. It's not that stuff doesn't happen in London, and clearly I've heard stories of what happens here. Sure. But the rate at which it does... It jumps out in my mind tenfold because it just hasn't happened. You know? And I am so geared and used to it happened that it just sort of like I just flow with it.
Sure, yeah. Huh. You know? Well, I mean,
I know this is a different direction.
No.
This is we're artistic come back to all talk.
This stuff. No. That's the podcast. We go where it goes. In terms of my brother is black, and he's I think a little bit less now, but he's frequently pulled over. Uh-huh. But I mean, so it does happen here. Yeah. It does happen here, but there's a lot that's happening there that isn't happening here. Right. Which sometimes we give ourselves a little pass here. We're like, oh, we're so little pat.
Yeah. But, I've gotten that.
I'm sure you must have noticed our how often we like to pat ourselves on the back. But in terms of coming from England to Canada, had you been to Canada before you came here?
No.
What did you think? I mean, and please be frank. What did you think about Canada before you came here, and what did you learn?
You from America, it's just like Canada's always sort of like the butt of these sort of passive aggressive jokes. You know? Yeah. And but I also had a kind of I actually had a romanticism though about Canada because of its role in the Underground Railroad, that was kind of always in my mind. And I know people, and I remember back when I was very young and the Vietnam War was on, and I'm at an age where I just missed the draft. Sure. A couple years older, and I would have been in the draft. Yeah. And but I remember friends, my hippie friends, and people some who left and came to Canada. Mm-hmm. And actually, I've met some Americans here who have been here since those days. Since I've been living here. Yeah. So that was kind of a romantic thing I had. And honestly, when the first day I was here, I said to my wife, "Oh, this is what America pretends to be." Because it just had that feeling that all the stuff we talk about, the diversity and this on the streets. And I know, and I say that to people here, and I think they don't see themselves as diverse as they are, I think, sometimes.
No.
And it's kind of like you almost have to come in from outside to go, "No, you guys keep fighting. Keep going in that direction, and keep standing up for, and everything. Even things like the land acknowledgement stuff at the theater. Yeah. I was like, what is this? What?
Yeah. It's interesting because I think one of the reasons why Canadians often don't see that is because the majority of our media comes from the U.S. Mm-hmm. and you often see yourself in the media that you're fed, and so we miss the self-identification of what's different between America and us because we see so much American media on our televisions.
Right.
But I mean, the land acknowledgement I think is great. I think the only thing that I think that we should add to it is an explanation about why we do it.
Okay.
That's because I've seen people who don't know, and when I first started seeing it, I was like, so who's this sanctimonious white person paying lip service to what's going on here? I think that we just to have a little bit of we do this because the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, this sort of thing, just a little blurb. Right. I want to go back to your sort of falling in love with the theater, because you said that happened in New York.
Yeah.
But what was it that drew you to it?
Well, I grew up in Albany, New York, and my family actually really were so far away from having anything to do with theater. I come from a big family, very inner city African American family. We lived in the projects and all that stuff. Those kind of almost typical stories, and only they're real. Those are real stories, and that's why they're. But and theater was the last thing on the minds of anybody.
Sure.
But I had a brother that was. They say in every sort of family like that, there's this pole star child that sort of separates from the sort of beaten path, and that was my brother Cleve, who. Out of the blue, somehow he became interested in one thing. He got good grades in school, which wasn't normal in my family. He was studious, and he started doing plays at the local high school. There was this amazing magic drama coach, this guy John Veely, who did really, and this is like the late 60s. And early 70s. And my brother Cleve, at a real early age, like 17, started writing and putting plays on at the local boys club. He would write these plays, he would direct them, he would use kids, and I was his younger brother, and he sort of made me act. I mean, you get the brothers who are making their brother play basketball, so you better get out there. He was like, learn them damn lines. You better get, he was like really hard on me. If I was being sort of phony on stage, he would nail me and lecture me, and I fell in love with working, doing, and it was just theater. It was for the sake of it. I didn't know that you could have like a career or anything, which is both negative and positive. I mean, in the sense that when I sort of left home to sort of be an actor, I had no idea how to build a career or anything like that. I thought you just got with people who you liked and you did stuff,
That's where you came from.
Yeah. And actually, oddly enough, now this is years later. Now here in Toronto, what I love about the theater scene here is that it is kind of like that. That's like what it is.
The indie scene really is kind of like that.
Yeah.
It's interesting because your theater origin story, because some people's origin story is like, my parents took me to the theater and I saw a play and it was magic and I knew I wanted to do that. But your origin story is like, I was doing the plays and I fell in love with all of that stuff.
Yeah.
Which is a little bit unique, and I think that's it's an unusual way to come at it. But again, it's like, instead of your initial experience being from the audience side, it was on the inside.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And I hadn't really seen a live play. Once in a while, the school would do some really corny stuff or something that would take you to some field trip thing. And as a matter of fact, like the plays that we did with Cleve at the Boys Club, we were like sort of socially aware even then. Like I said, this is like 69 or something. Oh, yeah. I remember we did this one play that had a scene. It was these vignettes, and one of them was about like gun control, like this father teaching his son to shoot and accidentally shoots his son. And so back then, and so for me, theater was always about what you're talking about socially. So then I remember the boys club itself, they were taking all of us boys out to the real theater, and it was some Williamstown or someplace like that. We were going to see theater, and I remember it was. Can you curse on this?
Fuck yeah!
It was fucking Oklahoma, and I was like, these fucking cowboys dancing and singing and shit. I was like, we were all like, what is this? Yeah. You know, it just wasn't. No. And I know a lot of people love musicals and all that stuff, and they're cool, but for when your idea of theater was that, you know, you make statements about what's going on, and you're talking, and then in what they take you the professional theater, and it was like these cowboys dancing and singing out of the blue. I was like, what? You know?
Well, interesting. I mean, in 1969, I mean, Oklahoma was already like old pretty stuff. Dated, it was pretty dated, you know. Yeah. But I mean, it's important in the genesis of the theater. But it's like, I can certainly understand like being used to like, the theater is where you make a statement. Yeah. And
well, I had to learn all that. I had to learn. I later on learned what sort of like what the American canon was. I mean, I didn't have any knowledge of that. Even the great playwrights, Tennessee Williams, Arthur Miller, I mean, all that stuff, I learned sort of post Boys Club. Like, oh, this is what I'm studying, and I didn't know that. You know.
So when you left school and you decided that you were going to make your way as an actor, what was it that made you decide that was what you were going to do? Because your brother was the outlier, the first person to go in that direction. What made you want to do that? And did you go to theater school, or did you just go out and try to make it happen?
It was just, I guess it was something I could do. I felt I could do. I don't think any actor, I don't care what they say, does it. I mean, at some point, you're in the mirror or whatever, and you go, damn, I'm damn good at this. Because it's like, why else would you do it? I can't.
It's true.
You know,
there is that moment where you're like, I don't know. I think you do have those moments where you're like, and maybe it's not I'm damn good at this, but it's like when I do this, I feel
exactly
more full than I could behind a desk somewhere. Yes. You know,
yeah. And but I didn't go to school, not because I didn't want to go, mostly because, like I said, the background I was from, you know, and this is before, or maybe at the beginning of all, like everyone complains, like I hear people complaining about affirmative action now. It's like, no, you don't understand. There was no action.
No,
you know, and it's like I didn't know how to get in school, didn't have any help getting in school, and so in my mind I sort of said, well, fuck that.
Yeah.
You know, and I lived in New York, and I went to like the studios. Like I took classes at Stella Adler Studios. You know, you wash dishes and you pay for your class, and often you get like deals from those places. You know, if you're really if you're really serious
Yeah.
and you don't have money and stuff, and you can sit in on classes. And I just sort of did that and sort of piecemeal. My training is very eclectic.
Yeah.
I had this private coach here or this studio coach there, this, that, and then tried to do plays, you know.
Yeah. And where were you doing them? Were you moving around? Did you do the go to New York City thing? Or?
I was in New York City. New York City, when I was young, it wasn't really wasn't kind to me. I mean, it did. You know, they say if you can make it here, if you can make it in New York, you can make it anywhere. Well, I guess I can't make it anywhere because I had the hardest time in New York. You know.
Well, I think now people forget what New York was in the 70s and 80s. That it was there was some rough shit in New York. Yeah. And, you know, yes, there was the theater, but there was also, like, to get there, you had to go through Times Square, which was not a particular tourist destination at the time.
I lived on 12th Street between Avenue B and C. And only if you knew New York in those days would you know to shudder at hearing that.
And now nobody would even blink at that, right?
No. Oh, no, now I left New York in 1987. I had an apartment, what they call a railroad apartment, one of those like with the bathtub in the kitchen, and you go straight through. And it was rent stabilized, and it had risen from $185 to $235 a month when I left. Right. Now it's like $2,500, $3,000 a month.
Yeah. Of course, yes, yeah. Where did you go from there? Where did you head?
I ended up in LA for a long time, 18 years. That's the story of my first marriage.
Were you doing theater there? Were you doing film? Was it?
I was working, trying to be a properly married man and have a legit job. I actually. This is my journey, right?
Yeah.
I took some accounting classes and I worked in a bank for which was totally like, my friends were like, "What the hell happened to Alex?" But I was trying to do this life, right? And it wasn't like, you know, I wasn't having this brilliant career that you're supposed to have and know you're going to have when you're 17.
Sure.
And that was the reality of it. And slowly things changed. And out of frustration, around 95, I began writing this one-man show, this solo. I didn't know what it was going to be.
Right.
I had never written anything before, didn't know if I could, and a friend suggested that I do a 15-minute a day writing exercise, and I even had trouble doing that, but eventually I started collecting these pieces, and I didn't want to do this kind of, I thought it was a really indulgent thing. These guys do these autobiographical pieces, like, why are you doing who are you, you know?
Yeah.
But all the stuff I was writing, the most interesting stuff was always when I wrote some sort of anecdote from my life or about my father or about my brother. And it came together to this solo piece I called Throw Pitchfork. And it took basically years before I finished it. And then before it was ready to do, and then I started doing it in like garages. I did it for a friend. I did it for a friend in her living room. Yeah. Then I did it in a garage for someone. And a friend of mine, this great friend of mine who lives in New York, this writer, director named Judy Tate, had worked at the EST, Ensemble Studio Theater. And once a year they do this works in progress thing. So now I was in LA, flew me to New York, and we did this works in progress thing. And then the next thing I know, the New York Theater Workshop wanted to workshop it, so they were workshopping it, and then they did, and I had an off-Broadway run with this play, like suddenly sort of out of the blue from not doing anything. I was doing that, and that sort of began the trajectory that I have been on since then.
It's interesting when you leave it.
Yeah.
Because I've done it. I left it for a number of years, and then you get like a little taste. Mm-hmm. You get like a little taste of it somehow. Like I had a friend who was like, I'm gonna do a show. I want you to do it. It's like I don't do that anymore.
Right.
She's like, but I really want you to do this. I was like, fine, I'm fine. And then I was in.
Right.
I'm in. I'm back in.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Because it's like a piece. Because I felt, I don't know if you felt like this when you were working at the bank. When I was not doing theater and I was just working like my daytime job, mm-hmm. I kind of felt like I was like playing a role but not doing it very well.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
I felt like I was going into work going, yes, fellow workplace colleagues, I am also a workplace colleague of yours.
Yeah.
I felt like a robot.
Yeah. And there were people there. I mean, I remember this woman that we're pretty good friends, and she had been there since she was like 19. Mm-hmm. We were like the same age. We've been there. And I remember it was really depressing because she had been there all that much time, and she was making, I think, like $2.50 more than I was an hour. And I was like, what? It's like, I would think that her salary was triple what I was making.
No.
Or something. It was really, yeah.
When you were performing your solo play, and was it like they were workshopping it? Were you performing it the whole time? Was it?
Yeah, they had this great thing in Portland called the Ja West Festival, and that was the first place they had me come from LA to there, and it was like this great. It was like I think it was 2 weeks. Which was amazing to me. Wow, yeah. 2 weeks, and I worked on this play, and then he said he would produce it, and then a couple of times they work at Dartmouth every summer as well, doing these workshops for a week, and I think I went there twice and worked on it 2 summers, and then I had a production. They gave me an amazing run. I had, I think, 3 weeks of previews and a 3 or 4 week run. You know,
I'm still like 3 week preview. I feel like that's kind of luxurious.
It was. And Jim Nicola, the artistic director, said, I really want this to be in the shape that it needs to be in. So I'm going to give you that.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really amazing. And for me, you know, I had never really kind of worked on that level before. Yeah. So it was like, I was just like, my mind was blown, you know?
Yeah.
And, and then ever since then, it's been, you know, I got to do another run of it at this theater in Ithaca, New York called the Kitchen Theater, which became sort of like a home for me over the years. I've worked there a lot now. And even when I moved away, they would fly me back from London or Berlin to do a show there.
Nice.
And you would think that leaving the country at that time was a bad thing, but I ended up working in all these other places. Like, who would have thought that marrying a German civil servant would be a good career move? But for an actor. But I've worked more since then than I have when I was living in America.
Have you worked in theaters in the places where you were living, or has it been like you've consistently been flown back to the U.S.?
No. I worked in London. Actually, in London, I had sort of the, you know what? I guess I have to say the biggest gig I've had. It was a stage production of On the Waterfront. Okay. It was directed by Steven Berkoff, and essentially it kind of kept me on and off employed over 2.5 years because there were 5 different stagings of it. It went to the Edinburgh Festival, the Hong Kong Arts Festival, where it would stay for a month at these places, and we had a West End run.
Nice. Wow.
Yeah.
Did you do theater in Berlin?
Yes, I did, at the English Theater of Berlin, and I also wrote a play that they produced.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've been writing more.
Yeah, I after Throw Pitchfork, I teamed up with this guy named Levandy Hawkins, this performance artist, and we wrote this very nastily satirical piece on being black in America called Black Stuff. That's sort of like the most politically incorrect but truthful thing. And so we did that together, and we had a little run of that. That even did like a New York Fringe Festival and some other stuff. And then I discovered the history of black people in Germany, black citizens, before and after the Hitler years that I didn't know about. And it just provoked me to write this play that it's called Schwarz gemacht, or How Klaus Found His Blackness. And it was I started writing it, and it was like sort of in limbo. Actually, New York Theater Workshop did a little bit of workshopping of it, but I just didn't know how to develop it and take it. But when I moved to Berlin, then I met at the English Theater of Berlin this director there, Daniel Bernet, who he's an American, but he's been working there for years, running that theater. And the black German character, the Afro-Deutsche, that's what they call themselves. In my play, there was a black German actor named Ernest Allen Hausman, and we were doing a piece together. And I jokingly said to him, "I wrote a play about you," And he said, "What do you mean?" So I told him about this play, and he freaked out. He was like, "No one's ever written anything about this, German or otherwise." So he read the play, and so then we workshopped it with him and Daniel, and it turned into this production, which they actually did in 2014, and then they brought back in 2015. So that was amazing thing to have happen. So I've had some really cool things happen in every country.
It's interesting that, first off, the power that history has. And sometimes when we don't know a history, and then we start looking into it. Because we have the mythologies of our histories, but there's all these truths behind the mythologies. And then there's the things that we didn't know. For example, like you were saying, the history of black people in Germany before and after the Nazis. And also the power of the writing muscle, that it just sort of keeps going. I don't know if you find this, but when I'm writing, I always have to have another file. It's like, here's the idea that I'm just like, little ideas, just like little, jot it down and keep going, and then jot it down and keep going. Because it's just like writing and creativity sort of like births more creativity, I find. So you've been in Canada for how long now?
Since August of 2014.
Okay. And you've been doing some theater here? Yeah.
This theater community has embraced me. And,
it's good.
Done stuff like first thing I did was this play called Hangman at the Storefront Theatre.
Oh yes, I interviewed Danny and the playwright whose name escapes me right now.
Right, Jason Mack.
Yeah, I didn't get to see that, but it got some really great notices, I remember.
Cool.
Especially for Prince.
Yeah.
I think.
Prince blew me away.
Yeah.
I mean, the person, the actor, this is an amazing human being. I remember after the first rehearsal when I met him, I went home. I said to my wife, "This guy's gonna change my life."
Yeah. Did he?
He kind of did.
Yeah.
He's kind of had a real... And, I'm not even around him that much now, but I run into him now and then. But he kind of did. He kind of... Because I've been through also some... I've been through some heavy health stuff. Like, I don't know I'm probably telling too much stuff, but I had like a cancer when I was living in Berlin. I had to work through that with chemotherapy, and actually 2 years ago here I had heart surgery.
Right. So
it's like I'm like the bionic man. The fact that I'm up and doing plays and running around, it's just like I'm like, yes, thank you, Lord. But anyway, but yeah, working with Prince, just his outlook on life, just like has affected me.
Yeah.
It's like, dude, I'm not,
Yeah.
And then such a amazing actor, like the kind of like you look him in the eyes and it's like you get nothing but truth.
Yeah. I've heard that. And you mentioned the indie theater scene here feels a little bit like the way that it felt working at the Boys Club in Albany. That it's like sort of like a bunch of people sort of like, let's put on a play.
Yeah.
Which it sort of, I'm thinking of the people that I know who do a lot of indie work, and they're all connected.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of, cross-pollination.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, just the other, a while ago when I saw a Danny's play, Prank.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was another actor that I know, they're talking, and they didn't know each other, and it took me a minute to realize, and I had to introduce them, because I was like, I almost assume everybody knows everybody,
Yeah. So the play A Girl Lives Alone, part of SummerWorks.
Yep.
So it's getting 5 performances. And you've been rehearsing it for a little while. Has anything surprised you about this particular play?
Jessica has such a crazy style. When you read the dialogue, you go, is this gonna work? Because she does a lot of crazy overlapping, and I mean it's become a thing. A lot of writers do that now, where there's these slashes and you go and but it just looked like, this looks like it's going to be really chaotic. And actually, in a way, the more that you give yourself to that chaos is when it really comes alive in rehearsal. The more that we just let ourselves go, is it, and not worry about it. It's not. She doesn't really write like star vehicles. Everybody, the whole ensemble is sort of.
But that's kind of amazing to work in when there isn't like, it's not a one person's show; it's everybody's show.
Yeah.
And I guess the whole, like, with everybody overlapping like that, you can't worry about it. You just have to trust the words and hope that everything comes across.
Yeah, and you kind of find like a rhythm.
Yeah.
That's more. There's your own internal rhythm, and then there's this sort of breathing rhythm of everybody, and feeling and becoming aware of where this person is at in this line, and how you're either under it or on top of it or over it. When you can, and you just have to. And the only way to do that is just rehearsing it.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess you have to, because everybody's rhythm is different, so everybody falls into their own rhythm, and you just have to be aware of what your co-actors' rhythms are, and you fall into wherever you fit in that, I guess. Yeah. Now, of course, we talked earlier about how, like, it starts with a murder, and it's sort of a dark comedy.
I'm waiting for you to ask me something I can't answer. What's he gonna ask?
No, but I guess what I'm sort of like thinking of is when you're working with a dark comedy, there can be moments of like, oh, I don't know about this moment here. Is this like, does that go too far?
Yeah, is this really funny?
Is this funny, or is this like, or is it just morbid? Have you had any moments like that? not to give anything away, but have you had any moments where you were like, I don't know about this?
I don't know if you're gonna feel that with this, like that. Oh, this is way too much. This is too pushing the envelope. Although, but then on the other hand, it might just be. I don't know if I might just be so fucked up that you know, like I went to see this play, this amazing piece called, what was it? Crave, I think it was called, in the Fringe. I hope that's the name of it. Crave. Anyway, it was this really intense piece by this young British writer who had committed suicide or something. Sarah Kane. Sarah Kane. And it was like really intense, and it was about abuse and you know, violation, and these actors, and say they were intense, they were amazing, they were riveting. And at the end of it, the actors said to the audience, you know, we know that this play can be very triggering, and if you want a safe space, we are here to have a safe space. And I was thinking, I was riveted and stuff, but I left going, am I so fucked up that, like, I mean, maybe I've been through so much trauma, I guess, that or something that's like, because there was nothing about it that made me feel like, oh, I'm vulnerable. But I could see how people could. But that was making me think, maybe I'm not the person to ask those questions.
But you know, what's interesting about that is that you were, to my mind, and I didn't see the play, but the way that you describe it is you were riveted by this play.
Yeah.
And you found it exhilarating. Just like watching all this stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
You're in a different space at that point than somebody who might be triggered by it.
Right.
You, as a person who is like, you're just being carried away by what's happening on stage and things like that. So that's not being fucked up. That's just like being taken on the theater ride rather than getting caught in a moment, which somebody who gets triggered by some of it. That doesn't make you fucked up. That just makes you like a person, like a great audience member who can get carried away on the theater.
Well, thanks. We're going to be great friends, Phil.
So A Girl Is Alone is part of the 2018 Summerworks Festival. It's at the Theatre Center, starting on August 11th. That's coming up. That's great.
Good. And I hope that this tangent, I went off on this personal tangent, does it some good.
No, this is what it's all about. This is what the podcast is about. It's about you. It's about your story. So thank you so much.
Good. Thank you.
This has been a Homebody Productions production.